Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday at 5 minutes past 11 in the evening, sirens wailed over northern Israel from the Lebanese border to Caesarea, along the entire line from Zikron Yaakov, Haifa, and further east to Kinneret, and the Jordanian border. There are dozens of cities. 15 minutes later, there was a second salvo, and the missiles were coming directly from Iran. And here's what's important from the very first second. Israel did not start it. Israel responded. We'll talk about that in a minute and in detail. Flights are, of course, being canceled. Ben Gurion is in chaos. And who benefits from this war? War isn't just about the right conditions. There are always those who need it. There are always hands that add fuel to the fire, and faces that sadly shake their heads in front of the cameras. And today we will do what no major network will do for you. We will name these people, and not just these people, but these organizations, these countries by name. It wasn't violence that flared up, but who struck the match, and what do they get out of it? Well, actually 5, yes. Iranian hawks, some of the Israeli left, American Democrats, Russia, and almost certainly China. Each has their own stake, and none of these stakes is peace. Continued. If you came here right now because your flight is falling apart, because Ben Gurion is in collapse or Lufthansa, Swissair have frozen flights, because you've been refreshing Seva Atom all day and Googling one thing, when will this end? Ladies and gentlemen, you've come to the right place. I'll answer that too. I'll tell you what's really known about flights, shelters, timelines, no panic, no lies. But an honest answer to when this will end is impossible without answering who benefits from this. Because a war ends when those who fuel it, when it becomes unprofitable for them. So let's do the main thing. Let's figure out who benefits from this. Well, to understand who benefits from this fire, we first need to understand how the woodpile was stacked. It was stacked for 46 years. Let's start from there. Well, let's do it there. The story in 5 minutes. To understand today. 1979. The Shah falls in Iran, secular, pro-Western, authoritarian. Freedom doesn't come to take his place, as the students in the squares dreamed. Instead, an Ayatollah comes to power. Theocracy. The rule of the clergy, which has one idea embedded in its foundation. Export. Export of the revolution. Well, maybe they call it something else over there, but it's the export of their way of life, their mindset. Not just to live normally themselves, but to carry the Islamic Republic and the revolution further, abroad, all over the world. Let the fire burn everywhere. Well, we know this, so to speak. Yes, from communists to Islamists. To carry it further, they create a tool. It's called the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. Remember these letters. We'll be coming back to them throughout the episode. This isn't an army for defending the country. They already have an army. This is an army for the project. And over time, the IRGC becomes not just a military force, it becomes a state within a state. It has its own economy, its own ports, its own smuggling, its own factories, its own banks. Then comes 40 years of patient work. Iran does not fight by itself. Iran builds what is professionally called the Axis, a ring of proxy forces. And it's around Israel. Hezbollah in Lebanon, groups in Gaza, units in Syria, units in Iraq, Houthis in Yemen. The logic is actually very simple. Let them do the fighting. With our money, yes, let their cities be destroyed there. And you, Tehran, stay on the sidelines, clean and with diplomats in nice suits. Everything is convenient, nice, beautiful, and suitable for handshakes. And all this time, in parallel, a second project is ticking, the nuclear one. Officially, it's a peaceful atom. Unofficially, it's what experts call the threshold. The ability to assemble a bomb in just a few weeks, for example, when ordered, if not days. There was a moment of slight hope in the West, although I'm sure no one in Iran saw it that way. 2015. The nuclear deal. The West lifts sanctions. Iran freezes the program, at least claims to freeze the program. But at the same time, they're digging 300 to 500 meters deep, under basalt rocks or something, whatever they were digging there, to hide something. But in 2018, the US withdraws from the deal, believing that it, of course, just delayed things. It simply postponed the bomb. At the same time, money also flowed to the IRGC. Since then, it's been back and forth. Sanctions, negotiations, then more sanctions when talks fail, and so on, right? And then, after the bloody autumn of 2023 and everything that followed it, what happened was something that had been carefully avoided for 40 years. The proxies took a back seat. I want you to notice that. The proxies took a back seat. And Iran and Israel started directly for the first time. I mean, yes, they exchanged fire before, yes, they did things, but mostly through proxies. And here it's direct, not through intermediaries. Face to face, that wall which you, Tehran, held between yourself and war for 40 years has collapsed, to a large extent, and it was involved in Israel's actions. And I would mention one person who was at the head of Israel. His name is Bibi, and his last name is Netanyahu. There, and here we are. Now it's June 26th. This is what's happening right now. Let's put together the picture of the last few days, soberly based on the facts. Pay attention to the order of events. It's important. Because in it, well, who made the first move? Which means, who needs this? Which means, who benefits from this? There was a truce in Lebanon between the government of Israel and Lebanon. A fragile one. Hezbollah essentially did not recognize it, and continued shelling Israeli territory. But what mattered to us was the truce with the government of Lebanon. In response to these attacks, the IDF strikes Dahieh for the first time since the truce. That's a southern Beirut suburb. And there, mainly, well, why did they strike there? They targeted Hezbollah's infrastructure. Not mainly, but exclusively, right? That's the heart of the group. And we kind of said from the start that we wouldn't, but when everything started happening the way it did, we struck there. And according to reports, by the way, the strike was coordinated with the Trump administration. That's a very important point. I want you to remember it because we'll talk about it later. And that's when Iran directly enters the game. The IRGC, scared that we might finish off Hezbollah, launches ballistic missiles at northern Israel. Around 10 in the evening, sirens go off all over the north. Haifa, the coast, Zikron Yaakov, just like I said, east all the way to Kinneret. 15 minutes later, another volley. Israeli air defenses are working and missiles have been intercepted. So far, I haven't heard of any injuries, but the whole country is holding its breath. The next day, schools and kindergartens are canceled. And I remember very well all those stories from when I had a children's theater in Israel. Somewhere from probably 1976 to 1982 it was active. Then I started flying back and forth to America, so it became a bit less active. But we were always going to the border zone and performing with a smaller, reduced group, of course, in basements for the children. That's very familiar to me. We played many times, and as they say, we shot through Panama many times. Not specifically Panama, but during the time we were there. In general, everything continues, but now it continues in this kind of overdrive on steroids, right? In Haifa, they stopped the new funicular. There are up to 40 million people on the other side of the border, and tens of thousands of our Russian-speaking families go to sleep under sirens. And in the morning, naturally, Israel responds, and now it's responding directly to Iran itself. And here, pay close attention to what exactly Israel is targeting. The IDF is striking military and nuclear facilities in central and western Iran. Tabriz Nuclear Research Center, military bases. So the university is connected to the nuclear program. Isfahan uranium conversion plant, the very one where gas is turned back into metal for a bomb. And laboratories, military industrial plants, missile launch sites, airport, what's it called? Mehrabad, I think it's called in Tehran. So, well, so to speak, there are a bunch of other names I could repeat, but you probably don't care. On this day, the U.S. closes its diplomatic mission in Israel for 24 hours and prepares to respond. Remember this rhythm. Shelling response, shelling response. Israel doesn't strike first for no reason. It responds. This isn't nitpicking their words. This is the core of everything we'll come to in the end. Well, I mean, let's talk about the asymmetry that they don't show you. They stubbornly don't show it. There you go. So this is what almost no major network will tell you today. Compare the two targets. What is Israel striking? Factories, laboratories, nuclear facilities, workshops, launchers, because they are preparing something to shoot at Israel. So we strike so they don't shoot at us, right? And what is Iran striking? Well, look at the list of targets: residential neighborhoods, houses, courtyards, and so, according to estimates, by the 10th day of the war, Iran had fired about 300 rockets at Israel, and almost half of them with cluster munitions. Cluster munitions. This isn't for tanks, gentlemen, it's for people. The very ones that are banned by international convention because they scatter dozens of fragmentation charges for kilometers around. This weapon was specifically designed not to hit a target, but to cover an area. An area where, well, there are people. People. An area where people live. A direct hit on a residential building in Haifa. 9 killed in the residential area of Beit Shemesh. Dozens killed, and all of them, all civilians. There's no talk of military targets at all. Here is the difference that they'll hide from you behind the word violence. One side targets what is used for fighting, while the other targets those who are sleeping. And when they present this to you, both sides exchange blows as if there are equal weights on a scale. Ask yourself, where did those weights fly? Where did the weights fly? To the workshop or to the nursery? This is not symmetry, gentlemen. It's called asymmetry. It's scumbag behavior. So, to help the one who's aiming at the nursery. Now, 3 facts that change, as they say, everything. I want you to keep them in mind. Fact number 1. Reports say the Beirut strike was coordinated with the Trump administration. Remember, I mentioned this. This means that in the eyes of Tehran, Washington is no longer a mediator, it's a party to the conflict. Second fact. All this time, there's been a carrot on the table, a possible deal tied to the unfreezing of about, how much is it? $24 billion. These are their Iranian assets that we froze. Due to the escalation, Iran is threatening to leave the negotiations, so they are ready to sacrifice the $24 billion they need just so that Israel doesn't touch Hezbollah. Fact 3. It would be funny if it wasn't so scary. According to Axios, Trump literally asked Netanyahu in a conversation, "What the hell are you doing?" So even within the Western camp, as they say, there's no single hand on the wheel, they're stepping on the gas. That means some are hitting the gas, others are hitting the brakes, the car is skidding sideways and so on. And that's how they're trying to present it to you. I'm almost sure it's all a setup. A setup in the sense that they're staging it because a lot of Israel's actions couldn't have happened if they hadn't been coordinated. That's why I think, well, now there's no point anymore because, there's no sense in playing bad cop, good cop anymore, since Iran has already decided that Trump is involved in this. That is, they understood, decided, became convinced that he is involved in this. But in any case, from my point of view, there is no crack in the Western coalition. The coalition remains as it is and continues to exist. Okay, that's how it is now. The surges and strikes have become the norm. And the U.S. is not above the fray. The $24 billion carrot is hanging there, but it will be taken away. And the negotiations are on the verge of collapse. Well, I said the phrase, on the verge of collapse. From my point of view, they were never conducted seriously in the first place. That's it. They, the other side, were stalling the whole time, in my opinion. Their only goal was to buy time. That's why they're on the verge of collapse. Well, even these so-called negotiations, are supposedly on the verge of collapse. Well, let's still ask, who actually benefits from all this? Because it can't be that everyone is worse off, right? And this is where, as they say, things get interesting. So, from my point of view, this benefits 5 players. So right away, let me be clear. And I ask you to hear it exactly. I'm not saying that these 5 are eager for war and rubbing their hands together. Almost none of them actually want war. Some are truly afraid and trying to delay it, but I'm referring to something else. And this is more subtle. Each of them benefits in their own way from not resolving this completely, well, so that it keeps smoldering. They don't want war. I mean, they don't want war, but they like it when things go quietly like this, right? Back and forth, back and forth. And that's why they do everything they can to keep it from being resolved. That's my reading of their interests, but as always, check for yourselves, right? Well, first of all, of course, there are the Iranian hawks, the so-called IRGC, the hardliners among the clergy. What do they have? First, there's the whole proxy axis. What's left of it? The nuclear threshold. And most importantly, control over the country's economy, ports, smuggling oil sold in evasion of sanctions. Why is it profitable for them? Think about a simple thing. An external enemy is not a problem for such a regime. It's oxygen for it. As long as there's the Zionist enemy or the great Satan, any dissent inside is considered treason during wartime, and a besieged fortress doesn't question the commandant about what he's doing, right? War excuses empty shelves, a strangled internet, imprisoned students, executions. For the IRGC, peace is more dangerous than war. Because peace is when an Iranian finally lifts his eyes from the ground and asks, why do we live so poor on such a rich oil land? It's the same in Venezuela, right? War drowns out that question. So these people, yes, they're basically the only ones who really want war. War, 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 right? Now that means a part of the Israeli left. And I ask you to be especially attentive, because it's easy to misunderstand me. The Israeli left, they don't want Israel to be attacked. No, on the contrary, they want to avoid war. They delay, negotiate, and seek peace for understandable human reasons, so you won't be hit by a rocket or have to launch one. Today. I'm not talking about malicious intent. There isn't any. I'm talking about doctrine, about the very approach that in Israel is called the concept. Not to defeat the threat, but to manage it. They think they can manage it, contain it, ceasefire after ceasefire, just a little more, just a little more. And this is where, in my opinion, the trap lies. Well, good intentions almost always have a trap. A ceasefire in which the enemy calmly delivers new missiles. And out of 15,000 missiles, or maybe 11,000 missiles, Hezbollah made 150,000, right? That's not really peace. That's a postponed war, and a war under worse conditions. When the lull was used, Hezbollah used it to rearm. It makes the next round much scarier. Those who sincerely want peace today may inadvertently bring about chaos tomorrow. This is not an accusation. It's exactly our skill, to look at what we wanted. And then carefully watch what comes out of it. And sometimes the kindest hands, if they don't consider the consequences, bring more trouble than the evil ones. Some other guys, then, Americans, so Democrats. A genuine fear of war and the lure of a deal. It resembles the Israelis, but with a slightly different meaning. No ill intent, I insist on that. A significant part of American Democrats are afraid of war. They genuinely want peace. They ignore distant conflicts, but if trouble nears them, they dislike it and won't tolerate that risk. That's exactly why they're so drawn to one idea. To return to the deal. Well, with Tehran, the deal. Everything we write about them isn't true. They're actually good people. They know how to tie a tie. Give them money, lift the sanctions, calm things down. The intention is noble, but keep track of the money. That's always our main question. Where will the unfrozen billions go? To kindergartens in Isfahan. Do you really believe they'll go to kindergartens? Or to the IRGC, to that very axis, to that very program? The money is already flowing along the established channel, and these channels lead to missiles, not to schools. It turns out to be a sad paradox. A sincere desire for peace can pay for the next war, and postpone it for later, when the regime has more money, and maybe not just a threshold, but a bomb. For a politician before an election, we make a deal today. Now, it's a beautiful headline, but the price is someone else's tomorrow. I'm not attributing malicious intent. I'm showing where the incentive leads. I suspect that some of these politicians are just plain stupid, really stupid. And some are complete scumbags. There, Russia. Well, she's an arsonist. Yes, that's clear. An arsonist by calculation. Here there are fewer nuances and more cold interest. What does Moscow have? The right of veto in the Security Council. Technological exchange with Tehran, especially on drones, and energy. Why is the fire beneficial for her? Well, you understand perfectly well yourself. Attention to what they are doing, and the price that can be charged for oil. Every fire in the Middle East. These are the eyes of Washington. Diverted from Ukraine. These are shells and money that are going elsewhere. And every flare-up in the Persian Gulf pushes up the price of oil, and oil is what pays for the war you know about. The numbers confirm this. During the current escalation, Brent jumped by 3% at once, almost $96 per barrel. For Moscow, the Middle Eastern fire is simply profitable. Period. Profitable. Money makes money. The longer it burns, the fuller the treasury. This is arithmetic, not just reading. And finally, China, a patient spectator with interest. The quietest one. Here's what Beijing has. It buys the lion's share of Iranian oil. In fact, it keeps the regime afloat with its money. It has the so-called Belt and Road through the regions. Its main goal is far from here, an island called Taiwan. Why does it benefit China if America gets bogged down? The U.S. stuck in the Middle East. That's the U.S. with its hands tied everywhere. Every American aircraft carrier off the coast of Iran is an aircraft carrier that's not off the coast of Taiwan. Cheap Iranian oil is flowing to China. American attention is drifting away from the Pacific, and Beijing is even playing the role of a peacemaker. Remember how it brought Riyadh and Tehran together. It's a perfect picture for China. Not a victory for Iran and not a victory for Israel, but an endless stalemate that America gets bogged down in. And generous China is counting its profits. Now put these five together. A hawk who needs an enemy, a well-meaning doctrine that confuses a pause with peace, a politician who is genuinely afraid of war and therefore reaches for a dangerous deal, and also one who really wants to get rid of Trump, and a neighbor who needs a high price for oil, and a patient giant who needs America to be bogged down. Few are calling for war, but together, those who act out of calculation and those who, out of kindness, keep the issue open, persist with their actions. The pile of firewood is catching fire. That's why this war is so persistent. It has too many interested parties looking after it. And before we move on to the main question, what will Trump do now? One request: if you've watched up to this point, you're no longer just a news consumer. You're someone who's learning to see who benefits from what. Please leave a like. Let the algorithm show this analysis to those from whom, maybe, I don't know, it's being hidden today. And we're getting to the conclusion. Now, why is this moment, from my point of view, special? And here I will state my position directly, but separating fact from prediction. Fact: the window for a soft solution has almost closed. For 40 years, the West hoped that Iran would evolve. Well, that sanctions, trade, negotiations would soften the regime, and one day it would change from within, through elections, through a change of generations, would become a normal country. A beautiful hope. But in my opinion, we are hopelessly late with this scenario. The country that could have been pacified by voting was lost somewhere along the way. Xer has grown too much. The program is too close to the threshold. Time is almost up. And here is my prediction. Exactly a prediction, not as a fact. Trump is facing a crossroads. It's almost binary. Either the regime changes from within, through pressure, through the people, through elections, which still means something in Iran, right? Or if that doesn't happen, Washington might decide that the Ayatollahs will have to be stopped in another way, not by persuasion, and as they say in Israel, to see it through to the end. And here is our main question, the one everything is about. Does the free world even have the right to see it through to the end? After all, we stand for non-interference, for the idea that you shouldn't meddle in another country. Yes, for non-interference. But this principle has its limits. It's ancient. In Hebrew, it's called pikwach nefesh, when saving a life is at stake. Almost all rules are set aside. Non-interference is a wonderful principle, right up until the moment your neighbor starts forging what he plans to burn you with. And not quietly. He says it out loud, on the air, every Friday. And let's remember both differences that we noted at the beginning. The first is rhythm, shelling, response. Israel doesn't strike first for no reason. It responds. The second is the target. One side aims at factories and launchers, the other at homes where people are asleep. The person funding rockets into other cities for 40 years is building a threshold, which, well, he intends to cross. He is the first to press launch and aims cluster munitions at residential neighborhoods. This is not a foreign country that should be respected from afar. This is the initiator of the force of killing, of attack. And against the initiator, the force of defense is not aggression. This is our cluster, a critical rule turned towards life. You cannot take from the peaceful. But you can stop someone who has raised a hand holding an axe or maybe a sledgehammer, I don't know what. So, to finish the job with a regime that has declared itself your executioner and pulls the trigger itself is, paradoxically for a libertarian, not a violation of the rules. The principle of freedom. It's self-defense. I promised there would be light in this tough topic, and there is. By the way, it's brighter than it looks, even with the sirens. The light is the Iranian people, not the regime. The youngest, most educated, most pro-Western street in the entire region. People who don't want rockets, or Ayatollahs, or the Axis, who turn on banned channels. Remember, we tried to catch them, right? Voices. They learn English. They go out into the squares under bullets, again and again, again and again. The Ayatollah regime is not held together by love. It is held together by fear. And everything held together only by fear is fragile. It stands as long as it stands, and it can fall in a single night when it becomes unbearable. It has already fallen many times, right? And now we are watching as this is about to happen in Cuba, in Venezuela, so to speak. That situation in which, well, if we don't help the current regime, it will be the same. I promised at the beginning to honestly answer your practical question. When will this end? What should we do about the flights? I'll answer honestly. Experts don't expect a total shutdown of Ben Gurion even at the peak. There will be a brief stop in operations for a few hours. There's only one rule. Check your flight status on the airline's website and have an alternate route ready through Cyprus or Athens. And about the timing. Here's the honest answer. This is the main point of the whole episode. This war will not end when the soldiers get tired. It will end when those 5 people we mentioned today no longer find it profitable. So don't watch the departures board. Unfortunately, watch their interests. That's where you'll find your real forecast. And what is important to understand at this crossroads? The end of the Ayatollahs doesn't necessarily mean a big war. It could also mean liberation. 40 million young people whose country was taken from them in 1979 and who have been waiting for 40 years for the chance to take it back. A woodpile that was stacked by 5 people can one day burst into flames, not with war, but with freedom. It has happened before. It has happened before. A wall that stands on fear always cracks. And today there are more cracks in it than ever before. We already know this. Even officers are running to the SIR. So when they show you the siren again and say, another war, nothing can be done. Remember our discussion today and ask, who benefits from this? Who benefits from this? And ask the second question, who benefits from the freedom of 40 million Iranians? The answer to the second question is hope. And it is more real than it seems. It is more real than it seems. This was our daily episode with you, and today is already the second one. Briefly, soberly, without hysteria, I hope so. Subscribe to the channel. Every day, about half an hour, 35 minutes. News and analysis for those who want to understand who is pulling the strings. And if you want to get to the root of why free societies confuse a pause with peace for so long, and how to learn to read other people's interests like an open book. Well, for that, we have a second channel. It's called The Roadmap to Freedom. Also on YouTube, please check it out, twice a week. There, we turn the skill of asking who benefits into a real investigative craft, into something that will give you the ability to recognize deception. Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen. That's all for today. I hope that the sky over Israel will sleep peacefully tonight. Goodbye.